Okay, let's get going again. Next up is staff report DCS 19-66. That's regarding a zoning bylaw amendment that's proposed to amend the Norfolk County zoning bylaw section 3.21 for the following purposes: to amend the definition of cannabis production and processing, to clarify the use as industrial in nature, two, to add the following sensitive land uses to the separation requirements from a cannabis production and processing use: campground, group home, hotel, long-term care facility, mobile home park, place of assembly, place of entertainment, place of sports and recreation, tent and trailer park, tourist cabin, and hospital. 3, to exempt a single detached dwelling on the same lot as a cannabis production and processing use from the setback provisions of the policy, and to exempt on-farm diversified uses on the same lot as a cannabis production and processing use from the setback provisions of the policy. Norfolk County has put forth the application affecting all lands within Norfolk County. I now officially open the public meeting upon staff report DCS 19-66. And Mr. Vaughn, if you could please present your report.
Thank you. An update to the existing cannabis production and processing use is recommended to prevent land use conflicts in and around the county's rural areas where producers and processors are locating. The inclusion of on-farm diversified uses on the same sites as cannabis production and processing is proposed in order to enable future cannabis tourism industry across the county's rural landscape. These modifications will help broaden the county's employment and economic diversity and help to foster a strong and unique future tourism market. Planning staff have reviewed the relevant policies of the PPS, OP, and zoning bylaw and are of the professional opinion that the proposed amendments to section 3.21 of the Norfolk County zoning bylaw in regards to adding sensitive land uses for mitigating land use conflict and permitting on-farm diversified uses is consistent with policies of the PPS and conforms with the policies of the Norfolk County official plan. Recommend that this be approved.
Okay, thank you. Questions of councillors? Councillor Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. On page 311 of our agenda, which is page 10 of 12, there's a list of allowed uses that you want the separation. Now, earlier this evening, we added some uses to the agricultural zone of a farm distillery and a farm brewery. Are they now going to be added into this list of things that we want the separation from? Or is that under the diversified farm use section?
So through the mayor, the way the bylaw is written is that we're going to, how it's being proposed is to allow on-farm diversified uses on the same site as the production and processing use. But if those on-farm diversified uses already exist in the area, then the processing and production of cannabis has to maintain the separation requirement because they're now considered a sensitive land use. Okay.
Thank you. Further questions? I just have one question about the industrial use. Could you just kind of touch on the reasoning behind that? And the only reason I ask this is because we now, as far as the legal licensed producers go, we've committed a bunch of industrial land in Norfolk. We have a number of major producers that are here, and I don't know if you're aware, but there's a significant impact on their hydro rates. And when we've committed so many resources to doing this in Norfolk County, and when the margins are being squeezed on the product already, I'm just wondering if that's really in Norfolk County's best interest to have it classified as an industrial product as opposed to allowing these people to take advantage of the agricultural rates.
Through the mayor, are you referring to DC rates or
No, to hydro rates.
I see. So the reason we're trying to clarify that this is an industrial use versus an agricultural use is to make distinction between cannabis production and processing and all other forms of agricultural production. In the case of cannabis production and processing, it is very different, and we've heard that earlier this evening, from any other kind of agricultural production. The big difference between this type of product and other agricultural products is the intensity it has on affecting sensitive land uses around it. It is also very different in how it's produced, in that it has to be produced in a very particular setting in order to be produced correctly. And we're going to find that out. I have a feeling we're going to find that out this summer, because this is going to be the first trial run that a lot of these outdoor grows are going to attempt to grow cannabis outside. We're also seeing an emergence of the hemp industry, and we're seeing that in Norfolk County. I've been getting a lot of phone calls about hemp. So what I think is going to happen, unless there is some kind of genetic manipulation of the plant, is we're going to see a lot of cross-contamination between hemp and cannabis. And without cannabis being grown in a very industrial type setting where air treatment control is used to control air going in and air going out, I think the plant is just not really going to succeed very well. But again, there are factors that could contribute to that being changed, particularly GMO type setting. But the county's taken a very, well, the planning staff at least have taken a stance that this isn't considered a regular agricultural product, but rather an industrial product. What that will mean in the future for the ag area is that we may be looking at this in a different lens for building types as well. Traditionally in the past, we've looked at these as ag buildings. That may change. We need to confirm this with building staff, but that may have some implications.
Okay, but from a practical perspective, though, if we're adding all these sensitive land uses in, the setback requirements are all the same, whether or not we have an agricultural versus industrial distinction is not going to change that. The sensitive uses are going to remain, the setbacks are all going to remain. What I'm concerned about, and from the sounds of that answer, I'm just wondering, have you researched the impact with some of these LPs if we were to switch to an industrial classification, and whether that would change their hydro rates? Have you looked at that?
Through the mayor, no. That staff have not looked at the implications of hydro rates.
So when we have a number of LPs that are employing a large number of people in Norfolk County right now, if we want them to be viable, again, I can't emphasize this enough, the legal licensed producers that are following the regulations, if we want them to be viable in their industry, if all LPs in Norfolk County are being subjected to industrial hydro rates, because I know right now already the LPs in the industrial park are already at a competitive disadvantage because they are being subjected to industrial rates, and those outside of the industrial zones are not. I think that has a potential to have a dramatic impact on our industry here, because that is the largest cost component for these guys. So all things considered equal, if it's not changing the setbacks and if it's not changing the sensitive land uses, I'm just wondering, is the justification to go to industrial enough to, really almost, I think, double the hydro rates that these guys are going to have to face?
So through the mayor, two comments to that. One, the main purpose of looking at this as an industrial product or a pharmaceutical product versus an agricultural product is to close the loop on the case for grandfathering and or legal non-conforming status. So previously, prior to the approval of the cannabis production and processing use, we had a defined term in our zoning bylaw, a medical marijuana production facility. There are still some producers out there that believe what they are doing is an agricultural product, and they're using that as their stance when coming to council, and likely that will be their stance when going to any further land use tribunals. That's the primary reason for us to try to close the loop on that. And I guess my comment, and I don't have the answer to the hydro thing, but my comment would be, should we be treating them all the same way? If it is a cannabis industry and production and processing, why would we want to give a competitive advantage for location, industrial versus agricultural? Or should we be putting them all in the same sort of pot as we have with Part 1 versus Part 2 facilities?
Well, I think there's a very, very large producer, I think probably the largest in Ontario now, is it, that they're planning on being in our industrial park, that was in my office, that are trying to say, hey, we've got a problem here because of the way that we're being subjected to industrial rates. So you could say, well, we want everybody to be on the same basis in Norfolk County, but the market that these guys are selling to reaches far beyond Norfolk County. So we don't want to put our own businesses that are employing Norfolk County residents at a competitive disadvantage on a national scale. Now, that said, I don't know for sure whether or not that designation would directly impact those rates. That's why I was wondering whether or not you had looked into that.
If I can, Mayor Chop, planning staff, DCS staff are bringing council more information in June on cannabis as a whole through a workshop. Perhaps we can look into that and provide that information at that time.
Would it be possible to potentially defer that industrial designation until such time?
Through the mayor for proceeding with the rest of the bylaw, yeah, we could definitely look at deferring that and bring it back to council at another time.
I just think, again, because of the number of, people that are employed in that industry, that we have to be sure. And again, it may be that you might find out that our own designation doesn't affect those hydro rates, which is great. But if it does, I think that we need to at least do our due diligence to make sure that that's not the case. Further questions, Councillor Van Passen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A year or more ago, I made a deputation to council sort of along those lines that I thought at the time that there is a reason to differentiate the licensed producers in the marijuana or cannabis production. It is different than agricultural, but to use the word industrial where somebody else can say, now it's industrial, they have their own definition of what industrial means. So to differentiate it from agriculture, but not use a term that, like hydro will classify an industrial version, they pay a different rate. You just got to give it some different name that is not agriculture, it's not that, so we come up with something else. I can understand where the new producer out there would be concerned, because I imagine that, even a 10% increase in their hydro bill is a lot of money.
Exactly. Councillor Columbus.
Well, I had that very question from day one when all this got going, when we sold the first property off Park Road, I was going to say Pot Road, Park Road to one of the applicants there. And why would you use municipal water and industrial hydro rates to grow this crop when you could have moved it to a farm operation with lower taxes and all the rest that goes with it? So that was my inclination right from day one.
Well, to be honest, when I had a conversation, that was my question as well. Now, I think there's some other advantages that are perhaps in terms of being on municipal water and so on. That is actually an advantage for them. But, what you do for one, you've got to do for others. But again, I look at it as if we are developing this industry here, I don't want to do something that's going to put our own businesses at a competitive disadvantage nationally. Okay. Any further questions from councilors? Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in favor of the application?
Good evening, Madam Mayor. My name is Peter Hellier, and for the last 15 years, I have chaired the Norfolk County Police Services Board. I am a sitting member of the Cannabis Task Force and an advocate for community safety and well-being. It is my hope tonight to persuade you to pass bylaw 5-7-2019 as it has been presented to you without amendment or abridgment. During the task force deliberations, it became clear that enforcement, and in particular enforceability by anyone, is problematic. Now consider Mrs. Frant's testimony from her email of April 8th, which was in your package earlier. The question was to federal government, how many inspectors are there allotted to inspect designated grow operations? The answer was not known. That is because the number is scandalously small and has always been scandalous. In fact, I only know of one raid countrywide that they have participated in, and that was in the region of York. When our local enforcement people requested information or support, they only get the party line, here's the talking points, check the website, or in lots of cases, nothing at all. We have to make it clear right now that the licensed Part 1 marijuana producers have not been a problem. There have been 0 calls, as in 0 calls for police service ever at any of them. They have been willingly compliant and cooperative with all agencies, and as Planner Matt Vaughn has stated in his report, 5 have Norfolk County approval and 5 are in the final stages of approval. Also, it is an extremely profitable crop. It is these that we want to encourage. They grow legally, cleanly, with respect to the neighbors, with security, pay taxes, sell in legal channels with a known chain of custody, and sell product of known standard. It is places that claim to grow under Part 2 of access to cannabis for medical purposes or registration for personal purposes that are the problem, and they are quite a charade. They are not licensed providers, and they are not legal land use. Let's call them for what they are. Let's pretend to be legal producers. Acting Inspector Millison wrote, referring to 681 14th Street, our belief is that this property was being used to further the profits of organized crime. Organized crime, which is of significant concern to the health and security of our community. Madam Mayor, but we estimate there are 50 such places in Norfolk County. 50 versus 5 legal and 5 in progress. Acting Inspector Millison has also said the OPP are concerned about the escalation of conflict between affected neighbors and the business owner as activity on the site continues and increases. End of quote. But as further information to council, there have been 2 shootings in Norfolk County. There have been numerous assaults, neighbor intimidation, neighbor bullying, break-ins, armed robbery, and mischiefs. Again, none of them at Part 1 facilities. The Haldeman Norfolk Health Unit, as reported in the planner's report, requires such actions as necessary being taken to ensure that operations do not pose a public health hazard. They go on to write, literature has also suggested that the potential for such facilities to produce wastewater effluents, which is all chemicals, that are a potential to harm water, well sources, as well as air contaminants, volatile organic compounds, etc., be dealt with to mitigate environmental emissions. Eric Ferguson wrote, again in your package, that we are told that emissions from these plants are safe and non-toxic, but we have little proof of long-term effects, much like secondhand tobacco smoke years ago. Dr. Gary Fisher wrote, the key words here are unregulated health hazard. That, to my mind, is a serious problem and should be addressed unequivocally at the May 28th hearing. Liz Jolly wrote, OPP police officer, under the heading Black Market Criminal Activity. If anyone truly believes that these unregulated cannabis marijuana operations only produce marijuana for individuals who are unable to grow plants on their own property, then they have their heads stuck in the sand. Their whole livelihood is based on the criminal black market and money laundering. Carrying on with her quote, talk to many of the business owners in Norfolk County that deal with the owners of these unregulated cannabis marijuana, and you will learn that they almost always pay with cash. End of quote. The purpose of the bylaw before you tonight is to tighten up the legal argument that any of the unlicensed producers are legal land use or have any claim to being legal land use. As Pat Earls has written, we need to set strong and hard rules and regulations so that it does not become a free-for-all. If there is one crack for some lawyer to get through, they will, so this has to be ironclad. End of quote was in your package tonight. It is not agriculture and never has been. Marijuana has always been a controlled substance and still is. There are clear holes in the enforcement net, and we cannot lose any enforcement action option. I would personally like to thank planning for their leadership and especially their courage in solving this issue, and I would respectfully ask Council to pass Bylaw 5-7-2019 as it is written and help give these folks their lives back. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I just have a quick question for you. I know that was probably written before the piece about, that I just spoke about with a hydro component with the industrial use. Can you, from a police perspective, is there a difference then that you're saying with it being classified agricultural versus industrial, if every other part of the rule is exactly the same?
Agriculture, you get into a whole different set of rules. I mean, I'm a farmer, right? So, and with respect to hydro, I'm presuming you're referring to the difference between single phase and three phase and demand charges?
I had a meeting, I don't know enough about it, that's why I was hoping I might be able to get some answers from the planner this evening. What I do know is I've been approached by some of our large-scale producers that are in the industrial zone that are feeling that they are facing a significant competitive disadvantage as a result of the rates that they're being subjected to, which I think is a valid argument. So now if we automatically, I don't know if it triggers it over everybody else, but if we automatically trigger that over everyone else, then those LPs that you commended as being, legal companies that aren't, that you haven't had any trouble with, or nor has any trouble been experienced across the country, that they potentially could face a disadvantage.
In our ginseng drying operation, we have a three-phase, 600 horsepower service, and I don't know of any discounts, and it's demand related, and I don't know of any discounts that we would get that an industrial customer would not get.
Any discounts at industrial?
No.
Well, no, I don't think you would get a
discount. The cost is exactly the same. But be that as it may, we have to reflect on the fact that these Part 1 producers, that they can sell for $10 a gram and they can produce it for $1 a gram. This is a very lucrative business, and if their electrical rates are a concern for them, it's not really a concern for me. What's a concern for me are all these illegal producers out there pretending that it's agriculture, and that we have very, very few enforcement options. We sent the police in, they kick down the doors, they arrest people, they charge people. 2 years later, nobody's been sentenced, and that place is still stinky as hell out there. So, and that is only one of 50. So we have a big problem here. And there's no way to access the licenses because the feds don't answer the questions. So this is an easy, well, nothing's easy, but it's certainly an enforcement option that we have to pursue, which is we either clean up the ones that have the setbacks to sensitive land use, or the ones that don't have the setbacks, they're going to have to close down or get a Part 1 license.
I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I'll be the first one when we go hopefully to Ottawa, to AMO, to hopefully go and have some meetings with the federal government and advocate on this behalf. I believe it's a failing of the federal government in this case to have allowed this in the first place, as you just said. And we saw earlier where you've got a designated producer with 4 licenses and 1,500 or 5,000, depending on which number you want to look at, plants. My question is simply whether or not the industrial classification is making a difference in the regulation of, in terms of the police with the part 2s or the designated producers. I don't see how that would make a difference.
I mean, respectfully, you're only dealing with one input cost for this, and an input cost that, with the margins that they have available to them, really should be insignificant.
But that's not an enforcement issue.
The enforcement issue is that we don't want to create classifications that can give any lawyer a legal argument that it has been legal non-conforming from the get-go. And in the case of medical marijuana, it has been covered in the official plan and in the zoning bylaw since 2014, and was further reiterated in 2014-97, which was a a bylaw signed by Dennis Trevally and Andrew Griselle on July 15th, 2014. What we want to ensure happens is that there is no legal argument that if they don't meet the requirements of Norfolk County for setbacks and air quality and light and all these other factors, that they're going bye-bye, and that's what's got to happen.
Again, I couldn't agree more, but I just don't see the industrial versus the agricultural as affecting. The setbacks are there regardless of what the classification is. Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Through you to Mr. Hollier. So just to clarify a couple of things. So you're here tonight as a private citizen and a farmer?
I am here as an advocate for public health and safety, but I am still a member of the Cannabis Task Force.
Okay. Not as a police officer?
Not a police officer.
Okay, thank you.
But I have a fair amount of experience.
I know
from the
you
police
do.
services board,
I
so-
think I've heard that before somewhere. Now, I just want you to reiterate a couple of the statistics that you said. That you said that there were 5 Part 1 facilities and 5 in the making here in
Correct.
Norfolk, correct? Okay. So those are the ones, again, for people following along at home, these are the ones that are in, a couple of them are in industrial parks in the town of Simcoe, I believe.
Correct.
Okay. And there is another large one, which used to be American, which is now, I believe, Wayland. And correct me if I'm right, that's on agricultural land, correct?
I think that's one that you would have to direct to
Okay.
Matt, but I can say that a number of enforcement people, including the Norfolk County Street Team, have gone through Marican and give it top marks.
Yes, I've heard good things about that. So the
I can't say the
issue-
lot for the other 50, though.
No. So the other 50 that we're referring to are basically the ones that we were up for discussion earlier in the evening for the public
Correct.
meeting. The ones that are, people are coming into Norfolk County, starting a new business, because cannabis is a controlled substance. So when you're buying a greenhouse that used to grow peppers and you're now growing cannabis, that's a new business, right?
It would, in my view, it falls under the expansion and development
Okay.
and would be not legal land use unless it received Norfolk County approval.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm following along all right. So what your suggestion is in terms of the bylaw tonight is that be passed in terms of supporting the ones that are Part 1. So would it be fair to say, my question I guess really is, if we were to deem them all the same in terms of referring to what Mayor Chop was speaking about with hydro rates and things, I'm not quite sure where that came from. I'm kind of thrown by that. Well, I'm not sure, was that just one business that all of a sudden in terms of the hydro rates? I didn't know.
Okay, we'll finish with the deputation, then I'll come back to it. if
Okay,
you
well,
like.
it kind of goes with the question here. So, so I guess what I'm saying is that if we were to have them all on industrial lands, would that solve a lot of problems? That's a question, I guess.
Yeah, I think what really solves the problem is having the Part 1 licensed producers
Okay,
following the law and the requirements, which they do,
right.
and the Part 2, or designated producers, claiming that they have the ability to grow this many plants in these locations and pretending that it's agriculture when it isn't
When
agriculture.
it is not, because it's a controlled substance.
It is a controlled
So it's
substance.
not. Okay. And the one final question, if I may, is that would it be fair to say that this is something that as a county we could enforce and we could control going forward in terms as to whether we allow only Part 1 facilities in Norfolk County?
I think that eventually that there could be a facility, but of Part 2 that would be enforceable. But I haven't seen any that that meet the criteria. So I know with Part 1 licenses that they are controllable, that they're doing everything right. We've never had any issue with them, as in zero, as I said. So whereas we've had umpteen calls for service and shootings and everything else at Part 2 facilities. So, yeah, I mean, If we only allowed Part 1 facilities, it would solve it. And with respect to the mayor's comment too about electricity, I'm still having trouble getting my head around this one because there are big utility hookup charges for these things, for everything. I mean, ours for our ginseng dryer was phenomenal. So electricity is just the cost of doing business.
Well, when it's your number one input, so with,
Not sure I would agree that it's their number one input.
what would
but
their number one input be?
I have no idea. I mean, but with a margin of 900%, I'm not really
I don't
worried
think
about
that
it.
they're all getting those margins. I think that the industry is changing quite a bit. My point was simply that I'm just challenging on that end why there would be more enforcement with an industrial classification than with agricultural. What the enforcement is the setbacks, right? Is saying if the facility doesn't meet, regardless of the kind of facility, if it doesn't meet these setback requirements, you can't have a facility. Doesn't matter whether it's industrial or agricultural. And as I also clarified, I'm not sure of the impact on the other. That was why I asked the question, hoping that I might find the answer. And if somebody said, no, the rates are the same, then no big deal. Then classify it whatever you want to classify it as, really. That's my only concern, because these places do employ a lot of people, and they have come here to have a conversation with me because you're paying agricultural rates for ginseng, but I'm talking about paying industrial rates, and the industrial rates, what I've been told, are more than the agricultural rates.
I would say that they are, under the D6 regulations, our MOE classification 3.
I just don't want to speculate.
That's my opinion. I think that the setback for unfiltered should have been 1,000 meters, not 300.
Okay, that's the setback requirements, and there may be a different range, but that's what our planning department's
we're
proposed.
referring to MOE classifications for industrial use.
No, I'm just
I mean, if you're getting into an agricultural setting, it's a whole different kettle of fish. I mean, we don't want to call it farming. We don't want to call it agriculture. It is a controlled substance.
Councillor Huffman, your suggestion with the part twos of not allowing them, I have done a little research into that. I think that the challenge that you get into likely is a constitutional challenge because the government allowed those for people to grow their own medicine, though I think we can all see tonight that there is an abuse of those regulations. But the problem is it then becomes a bigger challenge.
But we can enforce land use, so that's a really good option.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Councillor Ravitz.
Thank you, Mayor Chop, and through you to Mr. Hellier. Thank you very much for your deputation this evening, or for speaking and sharing your knowledge with us on this topic. My question to you starts with a statement, and I do believe this is a pharmaceutical product. I don't believe it's agriculture. I believe it is a controlled substance, and I do believe it's more properly zoned as an industrial product. And what makes me have that statement, and it's leading to my question to you, sir, is could you share with us some of the knowledge you have in the processing of cannabis, what takes place after the plant is grown, and then the end product that is then sold or consumed by the end user? I understand that cannabis is a plant, it's grown in soil, very similar to other agricultural products. However, once it is then cultivated, there is a refining process that takes place, and there's a variety of different products that come from cannabis, oils, things of that nature, and there is a refinement that takes place after the fact, and I'm of the opinion that that later refinement, that processing, does fall within an industrial classification. It is, in fact, an intense pharmaceutical process. It's creating medicine. And I was wondering if you had some knowledge about what takes place after the cannabis is cultivated.
I am not really qualified to answer that question.
Any further questions?
If I may.
You're not going to trick me as if I'd smoked it at some time.
I thought maybe kicking down the doors in your experience in policing, you may have encountered some of what I was speaking to about after the cultivation, but perhaps our DCS department might be able to comment on what's happening in these facilities after the cannabis is cultivated.
Through the mayor, I also did not inhale, but
I'm just to try to comment. It's more of a general comment, and that I do agree with you in the processing end of things, and that this particular product is more than agriculture. It's more than agriculture for a number of reasons. From a land use perspective, it's the conflict it introduces. So that's, I can't say how they're doing what they're doing, but I can say in order to do it and to do it correctly, they're doing it in factory-like settings.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone that wishes to speak in general or against the application? No one? Okay. I'm just wondering, Ms. Dusling, if you might be able to answer one more question for me, just coming back to this again. Actually, on the Norfolk County website, Economic Development website, there in fact is a request for consultation on industrial electricity prices, specifically in Norfolk County. Do you know anything about that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I know DCS has been starting to have some conversations with Hydro One in particular about costs. I don't know all the details of that on the website, but I can find out more and share it with council.
Because the industrial prices are more significant than the agricultural prices.
Again, through you, Mayor Chop, I don't know that answer, but we're going to find out and bring
Right.
it back in June for you.
Okay, thanks. If I might be able to pass the chair to Councillor Martin, or I guess, well, sorry, I'll close the public meeting unless any further questions. Councillor Columbus?
Mayor, I want to make a comment about this. You seem to be pushing for a different rate for these operations that are located in the industrial park. And I really have no sympathy for Part 1 operations that chose to locate in the industrial park. And now they got higher utility rates. They should have done their homework before they located there in their business plan to their shareholders or whoever, and they should have understood fully what their water rates would be and what their hydro rates would be.
Actually, I'm not advocating for the ones in the park. I'm advocating for not changing the ones outside of the park to industrial, which wasn't their business plan when they built their facilities. I'm not advocating for the changes in the industrial park at this point. I'm just saying if we change the ones outside of the park to ag rates, then they will be affected, and that wasn't the business model that they came to Norfolk County and built on. And again, maybe this change in our designation doesn't even remotely impact their hydro rates. And if that's the case, fantastic, and call it industrial, call it whatever. I'm just wondering if we can't just, given that we have a large number of well, not a large number of employers, but a large number of employees now that are employed by these LPs, if it doesn't make sense to pass the bylaw as presented and just give planning a chance to actually go and just do that little bit of research. And if there is no issue with the rates or with the impact of those businesses, then by all means, pass it as industrial.
Sorry if I misinterpreted, perhaps others did too. I thought you were just speaking about the properties that are 3 grow-ops that are in the industrial park.
No.
Okay, thanks.
Just if you want to close the public meeting.
Okay, so a motion to close the public meeting. Councillor Taylor, seconded by Rabbits, and those in favor? And that is closed. And further discussion? Would someone, Mayor Chop?
I guess I'd just like to move the recommendation as presented by staff, with the exception of allowing planning staff the opportunity to investigate the industrial classification.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yeah, and through the mayor, we'll do that in very short order and get that last piece back to council as soon as we can to close that final loop.
Thank you. Councillor Columbus?
Madam Deputy Clerk, could I ask the clerk if it would be possible to split that motion? Deal with the one we got here and then Mayor Chops.
Through the deputy mayor to council, yeah, a division of the question is fine.
Okay, so through our, to our, sorry, deputy clerk, how would you proceed? We go forward, and can you repeat the motion so I can get a seconder, please?
Through the deputy mayor to council, to divide the question, we would first deal with that the application of Norfolk County affecting all lands within Norfolk County to amend the Norfolk County zoning bylaw 1-Z-2004, file number ZNPL 2018-285, be approved for reasons set out in report DCS 1966, and that public input has been received for this application, therefore will be considered as part of the decision. So that would be one part of the motion. The second part, requiring a mover and a seconder and separate, would be something to the effect that council direct planning staff to investigate the industrial classification.
Okay, so I guess we are looking for a seconder for the first part, Councillor Rabbits, and any further discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Those in favor? That is carried. And the second motion, we need a seconder directing staff to investigate the industrial information. Councillor Rabbits has a question.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Martin. And through you, I have a follow-up question for staff. We said that it was coming in short order. Would it be possible to get a date on that? Could we expect that at our next council meeting, our next CIC? I was just hoping for maybe a ballpark as to when we could expect that to come back to us. The reason for that question is I would very much like to have some more representation of our cannabis task force in place at that time. Maybe to speak to the actual end product with some expertise. I didn't feel I had that subject matter expertise in play here this evening, and I'd very much be interested if that could be arranged.
Through the mayor, this is hopefully a very quick question to answer from Hydro. And I'll just say the reason being is like for MPAC, for instance, MPAC doesn't consider zoning. MPAC considers use. So when they do their property assessment and establish tax and that sort of thing, they don't really, if it's zoned industrial but you're using as residential, you're getting taxed as residential. We don't know if Hydro does that or not, but we're going to find out really quick, and I can make a phone call tomorrow. So we'll be back at the earliest public meeting we can get to. We are going to need to do another 14-day public circulation because this is going to be another bylaw that has to come back to council. So we'll aim probably for June 25th, and it'll be a real short report, very short presentation, and hopefully we'll get this sorted out as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. Councillor Michelli.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This question, I think, is for Matt. I don't know if it would be something that you could add to the information that you're going to bring back to us at that same time, or if you know this answer today. The mayor mentioned several times about the number of employees that these licensed producers employ. Do you know offhand right now what that number is, or if not, could you bring it, please?
Yeah, through the mayor, my understanding is it depends entirely on the type of automation they have within their facility. So it's the answer is probably going to vary from facility to facility, but I can canvass those facilities that we're in contact with, and I can bring back a ballpark.
That would be helpful. Thank you, Matt.
Mayor Chop.
I'm hoping that that's right as well. That's a good point with MPAC. And so if that's the case, that makes it simple.
Okay, we're looking for a seconder still. Councillor Columbus, and any further discussion? We'll move to put it to a vote. Those in favor? And that is carried.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Martin. I can take the chair back. I've lost. Okay, moving on now to bylaws. I have a motion moved by Councillor Michelli and seconded by Councillor Van Passen that bylaw 2019-41, bylaw 2019-44 to bylaw 2019-47 inclusive, and bylaw 26-Z-2019 and bylaw 33-Z-2019 to bylaw 36-Z-2019 inclusive be approved, signed by the mayor, clerk, and affixed with the corporate seal. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, I guess now we'll go on to other business, and we'll start with you, Councillor Geisens. Councillor Rabbits? Somebody else?
Could you do Mike Columbus before me, please?
No problem. Councillor Columbus.
Report, Madam Mayor and Councillor Huffman and myself were at the official opening of the Delcrest Community Park, the playground equipment. It's quite a modern, state-of-the-art playground piece of equipment, and if anybody hasn't been there, you should take a walk on it. It's like walking on water. Wonderful place to be. And I'm sure the residents of Delhi and Norfolk County will get great use out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to let everyone know that auditions for the Tailgate Talent Show will be starting soon. Auditions start on June 22nd. They'll be in Simcoe in front of Town Hall, and there is a $1,000 grand prize.
Councillor Rabbits?
Thank you. And through you, I wanted to announce that the Dogwood Awards are taking place at the Delhi Tobacco Museum. Tomorrow I will be in attendance. Doors open at 7 p.m. We're going to be recognizing 5 individuals that have achieved significant contributions in terms of heritage or cultural in Norfolk County. And it should be an exciting evening where we're going to be recognizing those that have made a very valuable contribution to the culture and fabric of Norfolk County. So I hope if you're able to attend, doors open at 7 p.m., Delhi Tobacco Museum tomorrow.
Councillor Martin?
Nothing tonight. Thank you, Mayor
Councillor
Chop.
Van Passen?
Nothing today, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Huffman?
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I just want to make note of what a great event the Haldeman Norfolk Pride event in Dunnville was this past Saturday. Just to make note for your calendars for next year, the event, Pride Haldeman Norfolk, will be held in Simcoe. And I just wanted to also point out that the Waterford Farmers Market will be opening on Wednesday, June 12th. Again, the hours are 4 till 7, so anyone in Waterford and Norfolk County, please come out and visit the market.
Thank you, Councillor Huffman. Councillor Michelli?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just was asked by some residents to, and this may be a very timely topic, to mention that there have been a minimum of 14 greenhouses erected in the St. Williams Booths Harbor area over the past 7 days. And I did promise those residents that that would be mentioned, and I know that it will be on council's mind for future meetings. Thank you.
Ms. Dusling?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight I do have other business, and it's just an announcement that someone left an iPad from the public hearing today. So if it is someone's listening and they realize it's theirs, they can call myself, Stephanie, at 519-426-5870, extension 1237.
Thank you, Mr. Slang, and nothing from me either. Okay, so, Councillor Columbus?
I'm in with a question. The dark fiber announcement came through the province the other day. Is there anything that the county can access, any dollars, do you know, that we're going to be able to utilize through our IT department? Do you know that whether the SWIFT is going to help us out there? Councillor Michelli?
I'm sorry, Councillor Columbus, are you referring, you said the dark fiber, I'm not sure what the dark fiber is.
Well, the SWIFT program that
Oh,
was
the
announced in
SWIFT
the province.
board program, oh yes. Well, there was a media release. The Norfolk County is going to be receiving $8.3 million to be one of 3 what the SWIFT board is referring to as a target project. Norfolk County turned out to be the #1 ranked municipality for need, and we should be very soon the RFP process will begin, and we should start to see some movement, although I've been told not to say too much about it, but some movement sometime in the fall.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Columbus. Okay, I have one notice of motion this evening. Maybe Stephanie, did you want to read that then? The first notice, the notice of motion is from Councillor Martin.
Sure. Through the mayor, so we have the written notice of motion. Our procedural bylaw states that as long as it's filed in writing with the clerk, then it can appear as a notice of motion, and it would then be a motion at the subsequent either council or council and committee meeting. So in this instance, it would be on the June 11th, and everyone should have it in front of them. And I believe Councillor Martin may want to make a quick comment about it, but as a notice of motion, it's not debatable. We don't need a seconder, it's just to announce it.
Thank you, Mayor Chop and Deputy Clerk. It is with great pleasure that I bring forward a notice of motion with regards to Meisner Dam. But before I do so, I would like to provide my colleagues with an update on the task force that Councillor Van Passen and I have been sitting on. It was established earlier this year with the intent of investigating revitalization of the lake, repairs to the dam, and was given the direction of creating a roadmap. The task force has been very busy collecting information since its inception, and a full report and timeline will be shared with you all in next week's public information package. So that leaves me to the notice of motion, which I believe you have printed in front of you. Would you like me to read it?
I think Monty would. Oh, you have a copy, okay.
Thank you very much.
So we're okay, thank you. And then with that, I guess it's time to move into closed session. I need a mover and a seconder. The council move into closed session at 8:05 p.m. to discuss matters pursuant to sections 239(2)(c), D, and B of the Municipal Act 2001 as the subject matter pertains to a matter of labor relations or employee negotiations and personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, and a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Rabbits, and seconded by Councillor Geisens. All those in favor? And that's carried. I have a motion moved by Counselor Martin, seconded by Counselor Huffman, that council adjourn the closed session at 8:23 PM and reconvene in open session. All those in favor? Let's do that one more time so I have, that's carried. Perfect. And motion moved by, oops, sorry, wrong one, Stephanie. That's my fault. That bylaw 2019-48 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Council of Norfolk County at this council meeting held on the 28th day of May 2019 be approved, signed by the mayor and clerk, and affixed with the corporate seal. Moved by Councilor Geisen, seconded by Councilor Huffman. All those in favor? Carried. And finally, that there being no further business, council is adjourned at 8:24 PM. That's moved by Councilor Geisens. Need a seconder? Councilor Rabbits. All those in favor? That's carried. Council is adjourned. Have a good night.